Welcome to the debate. What if I told you that the absolute greatest threat to a multi-billion-pound global industry right now today isn't some organized ring of professional cheats or, a highly sophisticated cyber attack?
Yeah, what if the biggest threat was just a perfectly quiet 65-year-old grieving widower drinking a single tonic water?
It sounds completely absurd.
It does. I mean, it really does. But that is exactly the crisis that is currently quietly disassembling the high-stakes casino industry. Right now, properties from Mayfair to Macau are ejecting players without a single shred of hard evidence.
Nothing. No proof at all.
Right? They are doing it based entirely on a player's emotional flatness, literally just a lack of visible reaction or stress at the gaming table. And it's all because of a small commuter productivity tool called the Aston Medical Hypnotic Touch Disc.
Exactly. So the Aston Disk is basically a cognitive offloading device. It essentially allows players to execute perfect betting mathematics while in this mild trance. It completely strips human error out of the equation.
Which is terrifying for the house.
Right. So today we're focusing on a really foundational question raised by the written testimony of a 19-year veteran, a senior floor manager at the Pembrose Club in Mayfair.
Yeah, and this central question here is fascinating. We're asking, is the casino industry's new, entirely unwritten policy of zero evidence ejections just a strict actuarial necessity to protect their mathematical foundation?
Or, on the flip side, does this kind of blind dragnet destroy the very core of the industry by punishing completely legitimate, innocent patrons?
So my position today is that this approach fundamentally breaks the casino's contract with humanity. By demanding visible, irrationality from its customers, the industry is just cannibalizing its own legitimate clientele in a paranoid enforcement frenzy.
And I will be defending the position that, as unseemly and uncomfortable as it really is, preemptively ejecting players who exhibit an unnatural emotional void it's a strict mathematical necessity for the industry's actual survival.
A mathematical necessity.
Yes, because to really grasp this, we have to strip away all the glamour. When people think of casinos, they think of, the chandeliers, the free champagne, the murmur of the croupiers.
The James Bond aesthetic.
Exactly, the James Bond stuff. But underneath the carpet, a casino is not really a hospitality venue at all. It is a 400-year-old piece of mathematics. It dates back to roughly 1638.
It's essentially a math equation dressed up in a dinner jacket.
Precisely. And the math is incredibly simple, but it's absolute. The house holds a tiny, highly consistent statistical edge on every single wager. If you get enough people to play long enough, the house will always, with absolute certainty, end the month with more money than it started with.
Right, the law of large numbers.
Right. Everything else is just theater laid over the math to keep you in the room. But, and this is really the crux of the floor manager's testimony, that math has exactly one vulnerability.
Just one.
Just one. It completely assumes the player is a human being. It relies entirely on human frailty. It requires limited working memory, fatigue, the inevitable urge to chase losses, and emotional volatility.
Because humans get tired.
Right. And the Aston Medical Hypnotic Touch Disc removes the human from the equation entirely. It hands the player a 4 to 9% edge over the house, which is catastrophic.
See, I come at it from a completely different way. I look at this and I see an industry that hasn't just lost its edge. It has abandoned its own logic in a state of sheer panic.
Panic?
Absolute panic. Let's be very clear about what disc play actually is, because the framing here really matters. It is not technically cheating.
Look, it is absolutely an existential threat to the property.
Well, a threat to their profit margins, sure. But it is not cheating in the legal or traditional sense. The player isn't marking cards. They aren't manipulating the random outcome of the physical cards. And they definitely aren't colluding with the dealer.
No, they're not doing any of that.
Right. They are merely using a commuter productivity tool to optimize their reaction to public visible information. The real catastrophe here is the casino's response to it.
By looking for flatness.
Exactly. By targeting flatness, which is literally just the absence of emotion, casinos are sweeping up completely innocent people. They are ejecting autistic players, or disciplined veterans of the game who have spent years learning to control their temper, Or, simply grieving patrons who happen to be stoic.
Okay, but to understand why the industry has resorted to these extreme measures, we have to look at the exact mechanism of the threat. We need to see why it fundamentally breaks the model.
Sure.
Now, if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, well, if someone is doing complex math at a table, surely you can just spot them concentrating, right? You'd see them sweating.
Right, you'd look for the furrowed brow.
Exactly. But the hypnotic touch isn't a calculator that a player consciously punches numbers into.
No, it's a neurological tool. I mean, it was originally designed for cognitive offloading and highly repetitive, stressful work environments, like air traffic control or accounting.
Right. It creates this cognitively transparent state. Let's take baccarat, or blackjack, right? The cards are dealt from a shoe, which is really just the plastic box on the table holding 6 or 8 decks of cards.
Yeah.
So to beat the house, a player needs to keep a running tally of every single card that has been played to determine the true count. That's the ratio of high-value cards left in that plastic box. Doing that manually requires immense, frankly agonizing concentration.
Which is what the floor manager refers to as counter's grief.
Exactly. Counter's grief. It's the physical toll of holding all that math in your head. It's the tightening of the shoulders, the subtle sweating, the nervous tracking of the discard tray.
It hurts to think that hard.
It does. A human brain working at maximum capacity to track hundreds of cards simply cannot look relaxed. But with the disc, the player doesn't feel like they are doing arithmetic at all.
It's just instinctive.
Right. The optimal play is just suddenly in their mouth at the exact moment it's required. They are simply sitting at the table, just existing.
They just play. Pleasantly, flawlessly, and without any hesitation whatsoever.
And the first major data point on this came in the spring of 2032 from a sister property in Monaco. The margins just went soft on the high-stakes stables.
Just completely dropped.
Yeah. Initially, they thought it was just variance, a statistical wobble where a few whales got lucky. But the math didn't self-correct. Surveillance pulled the tape and found 15 to 20 players winning at completely impossible sustained rates.
Wow.
And the really terrifying part for the casino was that these players had absolutely no tells. No anxiety. They drank, they tipped the dealers, they made small talk. The disc basically turned them into perfect algorithms.
Which the house cannot handle.
Not at all. Because in casino math, a 4 to 9% disadvantage for the house doesn't just mean the casino makes a little less profit at the end of the year. Through the sheer relentlessness of thousands of hands, it means the casino goes bankrupt.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You keep treating this optimization as if it's a criminal assault on the property.
It's an assault on the math.
But counting cards without a device isn't illegal. It never has been. It is simply the act of paying attention to the game you are playing. The surveillance director in Las Vegas figured this out when he read a neurology paper about this technology.
Right, the classification issue.
Exactly. If I take a completely legal cognitive offloading device, something I might use to manage a massive spreadsheet at my accounting job, and I walk into a casino with it, I am still only utilizing the publicly available information that the casino freely puts on the table in front of me.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it very differently. Because the strict legality of counting cards isn't really the issue here.
Then what is?
The issue is volume, perfection, and the relentless nature of mathematical variance. A traditional human card counter was a known quantity to these places.
Sure, they knew what to look for.
Right. They came in with a wad of cash, a slight scholarly nervousness. They stayed for a shoe or two, won a bit, got exhausted by the counter's grief, and then were politely asked not to return. The system couldn't absorb them.
But the disc player doesn't get tired.
Exactly. They do not get tired. The calculation happens south of their consciousness. They bet optimally hand after hand, hour after hour, week after week.
But let's just pause and look at what that implies about the industry. Isn't the casino's entire business model predicated on maintaining an inherently unfair cognitive advantage?
They would call it a mathematical edge.
But the house only wins because human working memory is inherently limited and flawed. The moment a human being finds a way to bridge that cognitive gap, to actually play the game optimally without suffering from mental fatigue, the casino cries foul.
Well, they're protecting their business.
But they aren't angry that people are cheating. They're angry that people are no longer severely disadvantaged by their own biology.
Look, they're angry because their product is being completely destroyed. The house edge is the product. If you remove human fallibility, the math converges on the mean, and the mean is no longer in the house's favor.
I see that.
And this brings us to exactly why the casinos shifted to this highly controversial flatness metric. Now, if you're listening, the obvious question is, why not just use a metal detector? Why read people's faces if this is a physical piece of hardware?
Because they tried that, and it was a spectacular failure.
A disastrous one. In 2032 and 2033, there was this massive technological arms race. The major properties spent somewhere around £40 million on these specialized door frame scanners.
40 million pounds.
Yeah. They were meant to pick up the specific electromagnetic signature of an active astron disk.
And the players adapted overnight? I mean, how did they get around a 40 million pound security system? They simply walked through the front door with the discs turned off.
Exactly. They walked through the scanners totally cleanly, went to the cloakrooms or the private restrooms, and just activated the devices there.
It's so simple.
It is. And the legal advice the casinos received regarding this was devastating. You cannot legally detain or harass a patron just because their betting patterns suddenly became optimal somewhere between the cloakroom and the baccarat table.
It's a fascinating legal reality, really. The technology completely outpaced the law's ability to classify the behavior.
So the casinos tried to adapt manually. They employed these watchers staff whose only job was to circulate through the gaming floor, physically staring at the soft skin behind the right ear of every patron, just looking for the device.
Looking for a tiny piece of plastic.
But the manufacturers made the discs smaller. They were hidden under adhesive cosmetic patches sold for sensitive skin. They were taped inside hairpieces inside luxury watches.
And inside hearing aids.
Yes, secreted inside hearing aids in patrons who had perfectly fine hearing. The floor manager's testimony reveals a staggering statistic about this. The cat and mouse game cost the casinos £1.19 in compliance for every single pound they were recovering in saved margin.
Which means fighting the technology was literally more bankrupting than just letting the players win. I mean, why was it so insanely expensive?
Because of civil liability. When you have security guards forcibly inspecting a wealthy patron's hearing aid on the middle of the casino floor, and it turns out they actually are just hard of hearing,
Oh, you get sued.
you get hit with massive false imprisonment and harassment lawsuits. The legal fees, the settlement payouts, the sheer manpower of paying all these watchers, it just bled them dry.
Right.
So let me offer an analogy here. Think of the casino's centuries-old mathematics as a highly specific, very fragile biological ecosystem.
Okay.
It has existed in isolation for hundreds of years, relying on a very specific type of natural resource, human fallibility. The astron disk is an invasive species. It is perfect arithmetic dropped into an ecosystem that has absolutely no natural defenses against it.
A super predator.
Exactly. When an invasive species threatens to collapse an entire biome, you don't have the luxury of meticulously trapping each individual invader. You have to use blunt, scorched earth methods to call the threat before the ecosystem dies entirely.
And that's what flatness is.
That is what targeting flatness is. It is a blunt instrument, yes, but it is necessary.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered what flatness actually means in practice on the casino floor? Because you call it a blunt instrument, but we really need to be incredibly precise about what is occurring here.
Go ahead.
Under the old regime, the casino acted on positive evidence, a specific known betting pattern, a physical tell, a verified tape reviewed by surveillance. Under this new regime, they act on flatness, and flatness is literally the absence of evidence.
Well, it's the absence of human emotion, a complete emotional void.
Exactly. It's a becalmed presence. But the disc player isn't the only person who exhibits a blank affect. The floor manager explicitly outlines this tragedy in the text.
The collateral damage.
Yes, an autistic player who has come to the same table for 40 years to enjoy the quiet repetition of the cards, they exhibit flatness. A highly experienced gambler who has, through decades of patient discipline, learned to keep his face completely still, exhibits flatness.
That's true.
Someone on perfectly legal anti-anxiety medication exhibits flatness. The disc player is completely indistinguishable from these ordinary, innocent people on the surveillance tape.
They look identical.
They do. And the casinos know this, and they have made a calculated decision to remove them all anyway. They are punishing people for the crime of not demonstrating enough visible suffering when they lose their money.
Because they have to. The legal department's mandate to the floor managers is chillingly clear. Do not attempt to find out if they actually have a disc.
Because that creates evidence.
Exactly. The moment you pull them aside to investigate, you generate evidence that could be used against the property in a civil action. You simply ask them to leave, which a private club is legally allowed to do, without ever providing a reason.
Which brings us to the collateral damage of this actuarial survival tactic. And I think we really have to look closely at the specific Thursday incident the floor manager describes, because it completely undermines the morality of your whole ecosystem analogy.
The widower.
Yes. We have a 65-year-old man who walks into the Pembrose Club alone. He's wearing a dinner jacket from 1998. He sits at the high-stakes baccarat table at 10:37 in the evening.
Just a normal Thursday.
Right. He plays for exactly 1 hour and 51 minutes, and he wins roughly £43,000.
He played exactly the way perfect mathematics would dictate.
He played optimally, yes. But importantly, he didn't exhibit any of the traditional betting signatures of a mechanical card counter. He varied his bet size, but not in a rigid way that correlated perfectly with the shoe.
Right, so the betting pattern wasn't what got him caught.
Exactly. What flagged him to surveillance wasn't his betting at all. It was his perfect stoicism. He didn't flinch on his substantial losses, and he didn't show a flicker of pleasure on his massive wins.
He just sat there.
He just nodded courteously to the dealer, with the exact same microsecond of duration each time. He drank a single tonic water. Surveillance flagged him at the 40-minute mark. The inspector flagged him at 70.
And then they moved in.
Yeah. And because of that, simply because his face was too still, the floor manager approached him at the 111-minute mark and kicked him out of the club.
With the practice courtesy of a profession that has been asking people to leave rooms for 200 years, without ever giving him a formal reason.
Right. So he is escorted to the cashier, and when he gets there, he reveals the truth. He wasn't wearing an Aston disc. He was completely clean.
Which is heartbreaking.
It is. He had played at that exact club since 1987. He only came in that night because it was the anniversary of his wife's death, and he was grieving. He was stoic because he was in mourning.
Yeah.
He tipped the cashier the full odd amount, told the floor manager he would never return, and just walked out into Curzon Street.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. That specific incident is a profound tragedy. There is no debating that.
It's awful.
It is. The floor manager is clearly haunted by it, hiding in the basement staff toilet afterwards, rewatching the tape 3 times, just trying to find some justification. But from a macro-actuarial standpoint, the property simply cannot risk the mathematical bleed.
Even at the cost of their humanity?
The floor manager watched that man play for 3 hands, and they played out exactly the way an algorithm would dictate. There is no test, literally none, in the entirety of modern casino operation to distinguish a deeply stoic, grieving human being from a player armed with a hypnotic touch disc.
Because they've chosen not to look for one?
Because they can't. The policy dictates erring on the margin toward removal, because the alternative is the rapid collapse of the entire business. From the casino's perspective, the cost of ejecting the occasional innocent patron is materially lower than the cost of permitting a disc player to stay at the table for even 1 more hour.
But listen to what you are actually defending. You're defending a business model that ejects a loyal 30-year patron who is grieving his dead wife simply because he kept his face still.
It's the only defense they have left.
The floor manager admits in the text that the standard of proof has fallen to 0. They are explicitly told not to investigate because finding out someone is innocent generates liability. They just sweep the floor of anyone who doesn't look emotionally compromised.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because the legal liability is merely a secondary symptom of the primary illness, which is that the foundational math is broken.
How so?
If they let that man stay, and he happened to be a disc player, the casino bleeds. If they let 10 of him stay, the casino closes its doors by the end of the quarter. The human being, the irrational, tired, emotional human being, was the fundamental variable on which the entire cathedral rested.
The cushion of irrationality.
Exactly.
When you put a piece of pure arithmetic dressed in evening wear into that chair, the casino instantly ceases to function.
Well, if a business can only survive by assuming every quiet, composed customer is an existential threat, then I would argue that business no longer deserves to exist.
That's a strong statement.
But the floor manager writes it beautifully in their testimony. They say, "I believe my industry has run out of the cushion of irrationality on which it was built."
It's a haunting line.
It is, because the casino is no longer selling a feeling or a luxurious experience. It's operating a dragnet. They are explicitly demanding that you perform your irrationality for them.
Prove that you're human.
Exactly. If you do not show them your cushion of irrationality, if you don't sweat or sigh or look nervous, they remove you. When a hospitality institution punishes a grieving widower for failing to show the required emotional vulnerability, it has lost its reason to exist. The floor manager themselves says it. That is not a trade. That is the sound of a trade ending.
The trade isn't dead yet, but it is deeply, irreversibly mutated. The floor manager is caught between their inherent humanity and their brutal job description.
It's an impossible position.
They go down to the surveillance suite, they watch the tape of the widower over and over, zooming in on his face, and they still cannot tell what they were watching. Was it profound human grief, or was it a cognitive offloading device? That ambiguity is the permanent new reality of the casino floor.
It is, and it's a grim reality.
As we wrap up this discussion, I stand by the brutal mathematics of the situation. As long as the Aston hypnotic touch exists, the centuries-old foundation of the casino is structurally unsound.
Even if fixing it means breaking the social contract.
Yes, ejecting players who display an emotional void is undoubtedly an ugly, blunt instrument. It's unseemly, but it is the only remaining defense against the technology that turns fallible patrons into mathematically optimal algorithms. The ecosystem has to be protected, even if the methods are scorched earth.
And I firmly maintain that a hospitality industry cannot survive by going to war with its own patrons over their lack of visible irrationality. You simply cannot build a sustainable, ethical business model on zero evidence ejections.
Even to save the math.
Right. When you reach the point where you are punishing a harmless widower for failing to perform his emotional vulnerability at a baccarat table, the mathematics hasn't just failed. The morality of the institution has failed right alongside it.
I think both of us are deeply moved by the unresolved tragedy of the floor manager in this text. They now approach tables every night not knowing if they are protecting the property from a technological threat or rejecting an innocent person who is just having a quiet evening.
It's a heavy burden. They literally wrote this testimony, sitting in a Bayswater kitchen at dawn, dreading their next shift, knowing they will put on a tuxedo and ask someone to leave without ever being permitted to know if they were right. It's a terrifying position to be placed in. The collision of human fallibility and perfect technology is only going to become more complicated, and it's leaving the people on the ground, the floor managers, the dealers, the innocent patrons, to navigate the wreckage.
We leave it to you, the listener, to form your own conclusion on whether the casino's actuarial survival tactics are justified. But the next time you picture a casino, don't just see the chandelier and the free drinks. Think about the cold, relentless mathematics operating underneath it all, and ask yourself, how much of your own human frailty are you required to show just to be allowed to stay in the room?
That's a wrap on today's chapter. We hope you enjoyed settling in with us over your lunch break. New chapters drop twice a week right here on the New Atlantis Inc., so make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you never miss what happens next. This story is also available on Amazon in hardback, paperback, and Kindle editions. Thanks for being here. We'll see you at our next lunchtime listening, and keep on reading.